Thank you for watching. My name is Glenn Morgan, and this is We the Govern. Today we're going to talk about the critical importance of local activism and how you can make a difference where you live today. Today we're going to be talking about the importance of local activism, and more importantly, I think this is just really me communicating to other activists out there, particularly those who feel like they can't make an impact or they don't think they can make an influence or change what's happening around them. And first of all, I want to make sure that you know that that's not true. But I think part of the reason why that attitude exists out there, very commonly in people's kind of the groupthink that tends to go on in the world of activism, that it's because people oftentimes obsess about all these negative stories at a national level. And it seems so removed and so distant. How can you make things happen 3,000 miles away from where you live? And that's a great question. I live in Washington State. Washington, D.C. is a heck of a long ways away from where I live. And so oftentimes what happens back there seems distant and murky, except that what we read in the news or online or in social media gets to bring all these crazy stories to us. And so we're just reading it at our desk or on our phone or at home, and it just seems like it's right there in our face. And I think that in order for activists to be remotely impactful in anything that they do, I think you have to start local, and I think that's really important. And I've said that for years now, and when I used to work at the Freedom Foundation, I would travel around the state helping local activists get started, get organized, and find things to focus on where they can actually make an impact, very tangible, usually pretty quickly, where they live. This is important. It doesn't mean that it's easy. It's important because where you live matters. That's your community. Oftentimes that's your family, your neighbors, friends, people that you've known for a long time. These are people you've gotten to know. And if you have a hard time making an impact in City Hall, then why do you think that you're going to have the ability to make a big impact in Washington, D.C.? Start local. It's the same thing that oftentimes the environmentalists will say, where they think globally and act locally. That applies to liberty and freedom as well. If you care about freedom and liberty at a global level, and most of us do, then you need to start acting locally where you can actually make a fairly big impact. A very small number of people can have a huge influence on their city council or on their county commission or at their school board or in other local ways in your community. I think this is very important, and we oftentimes overlook it because it's not as exciting, it's not as sexy, it's not as dramatic as something that's going on clear across the country. So let's talk about some ways that you can quickly make an impact and have some influence where you live locally, and some of the dangers, the traps I think that we fall into that reduce our ability to be an effective activist. Number one, I think the biggest trap that we fall into is this idea that we're just going to let somebody else do it for us. I'm sorry, but that is not going to happen. If you don't step up and organize and get involved with other people who share your concerns, it will not probably happen. You cannot just assume somebody else is going to do it for you. And just a little note, when somebody tells you trust the plan, right, or trust these guys, they're going to do it for you, that's a pretty big warning sign that it isn't actually true. You shouldn't trust a plan. You shouldn't trust some other people. You shouldn't trust those politicians. The idea of trust but verify, not only was that a good approach in the Cold War, I think that was probably a pretty good approach today. Always pay attention. Always double check what's going on locally, and make sure that you're engaged and involved with other people. And those other people, you can trust them because you've worked with them for a while. You live near them. They're in your community. Get together and put some pressure on your city council. Maybe you don't like those ridiculous ordinances, or you realize that they're corrupt, as unfortunately a distressingly large percentage of people in public office are, especially at that senior level. Get involved, pay attention, expose the truth, share that word widely in your community. People actually are hungering for this information. They don't need another national news story out of D.C. There's thousands of those coming out every day. But there's hardly anybody that's paying any attention to what's actually going on in your city hall, your county council, or even in your state legislature oftentimes. That is where you have the ability, with a very small group of other people, to make a huge impact. It's very important, and I don't know why the liberty and freedom movement tends to not pay attention to that, but that is where we have to make an impact. Everything from our gun rights to our free speech rights, and to regulation, to taxes, all of these things are tremendously influenced by our local community. So we have to be engaged, we have to be involved. So the second thing I think that oftentimes is a trap that we fall into is that when things don't go right, then we want to abandon ship and run away. Now, that is not a long-term solution. You can, decide that, everything's going to hell in a handbasket, so I'm going to go back to Idaho and build a bunker and live there and hopefully, survive the coming apocalypse. And perhaps you will, and that has not historically worked out too well, though, for most people. Usually, you have to engage locally and make a change where you are locally, and that's the only way you're going to be able to make things happen. I mean, now, to be fair, if you live in downtown Seattle, I totally understand why you'd want to get out of that place. If you live in downtown San Francisco or Portland, I understand that maybe you want to live more rurally. Judging by moving trends, that is a true and common thing that's happening. And I understand if you live in California, it's become so bad and it probably feels hopeless, so you're trying to move out. A lot of people are moving to our state, Washington, just because they wanted to escape California. This is typically what happens when you get the authoritarian left that takes over a city or a state. It always gets worse, and so people want to leave. But at some point, we have to engage and we have to prevail, because there's not that many places left where people who care about freedom and liberty can live and not have any of these fights going on. Even if you move to states that you think are so conservative or so focused on freedom and liberty, you will find that those problems that you just left are going to be happening right there. So it's a lot easier where you can get together people you've known for many years who live in your community, who trust you and know you, to band together and start working in some productive way. Now, not all activism is equal. I do believe that you have to show up. That's why I always end my videos with "the future belongs to those who show up," because it does. If you're willing to show up at city council meetings and testify and engage on a regular basis with other people and have intelligent comments and have you expose the truth about what's going on, you will have a bigger influence than if you just simply make Facebook posts and make just random comments there online. Keyboard warriors will not win the fight. It doesn't mean that you can't have some elements of that in what you're doing, but the ability to communicate and spread the word in your community is very important. Now, this is why I care so much about the First Amendment, and this is why a couple weeks ago, why I had that event down at the Washington State Capitol campus, the First Amendment event, where we were going to commit an act of free speech, and why I was willing to confront and potentially be arrested by the state Capitol police because they had imposed these crazy rules. And that worked out very well. The state Capitol campus police and everybody realized that their policies were wrong, that they were illegal. They didn't admit that they were illegal, but they were wrong and illegal, and they knew it. And so they backed off, and we had a great event. That's all we needed to do to and they suspended the rules moving forward. So now other people can go up there and have speakers and be able to actually speak on campus. Those little examples, it may sound like a minor victory here and there, but basically, successful activism, it consists of a lot of minor victories that just pile up over time. You also have setbacks. And when setbacks happen, you don't just go away, take your toys, and run home. You find new ways and innovative ways of pushing back. The First Amendment does matter a lot to us. That's why I care so much about it, because I think that's an element of success for any opportunity for any successful activism. We have to have the ability to communicate. And that's why the left is so threatened by it. The authoritarian state enterprises, they hate the fact that you have free speech. That's the last thing they want you to have, because exposing the truth is a powerful tool. Corruption is found in every level of government, from your school board all the way up to the Washington, D.C. It's going to be there. And exposing it is something that they don't want anybody to do. And when you're able to expose that, when you're able to expose the truth about what's happening in your community, you're going to find a lot of people who might be otherwise apathetic, who might not care, who you may not have even paid attention to. They may start to be engaged in the process as well, and they may start to work with you. And you'll be surprised how quickly, provided you have the ability to communicate to them, how quickly people will seem to change both how they're engaged in government, how they view government, how they vote. All kinds of different things start to happen for good when you're able to do that. It starts local, though. And if you're not willing to go out and talk to your neighbors and your friends and people who live in your community, and be aware that maybe sometimes you could be somebody might look at you sideways at Costco. If that's your fear, then you've got to overcome that fear, because that stuff happens. I have it happen to me all the time. And sometimes people, I never know when they come up to me in the parking lot. Are they going to like what I've been doing, or are they going to hate what I've been doing? I don't know. But you can't live your life in fear that way. If you are living your life in fear because you're worried that somebody's going to look at you sideways, then I would really re-examine yourself and think about why you're doing that. We really owe it, not just to ourselves, and not just to our community, but frankly to the future generations. The only reason that we're here today, the only reason that we have any of the freedom and liberty that we have, is because past generations were willing to face whatever the challenges were that they had lived through in their time, and they stood up, and they got engaged, and they got involved, and they were able to make something happen. They were able to make change. And it wasn't perfect. Anytime you read those stories, you'll find that they had tremendous setbacks. In the early 1800s, the federal government was imprisoning people, under the Alien and Sedition Act for daring to write editorials that were negative. In the Reconstruction South, you had a very authoritarian rule where they threw out ballots and had total corruption, trying to suppress the black vote there and the formerly freed slaves. And they were hanging people, hanging Republicans, hanging other people throughout the Democrat Party South. And the stories like this have actually come up even in more recent times around the country where government is so corrupt that, that they seem to have lost all control. But eventually, when those changes come, it's because of small groups of people just like you and your friends and other activists who share the same concern and passion. It doesn't mean that you're going to have a 2-hour Sunday special amazing victory. It just means that if you can get together and start to make an impact, you will be surprised at how much of an impact that you will have over time. Now, I'm going to close this video just with a little note, particularly if you don't live too far away from where I do, or if you need this help. I'm here to help, and I'm not the only one out there. I'm probably not even the best, but I can definitely be somebody that can come out and help you get organized, help you come up with other ideas, help you come up with some innovation, and just being involved and engaged and exposing the truth where you live. Because I really do believe that the future belongs to those who show up, and I'm asking for more people to get out there and show up with me and with others. So if you like this video, please feel free to share it with others, subscribe to the channel, go to my website at wethegovern.com, maybe that'll give you some ideas. And I'd really love to see any comments below from people who have been active in their communities and the success and the failures and the challenges that you've had. Please feel free to add those below. I love hearing about those stories. I do read all the comments. Can't always respond to all of them, but I will read them all. And I just appreciate anybody who's willing to get involved and be engaged. It's a small group of people like you and I that are going to make the difference and make change, good change in our country. And I just look forward to reading about those, and feel free to share this with others, and I hope to see you soon and hear your comments soon.